Persephone. Not long after the world began, but after Zeus, the supreme god, and his brothers had defeated the Titans, the 100-armed giants, Typhon, Briareus, Enceladus, and their brothers rose up against the gods. Finally they too were subdued and buried alive under Mount Etna. There the monsters struggled to escape the underworld, shaking the earth with tremors men call earthquakes, and breathing fire which erupted through the mountain, causing what is known today as volcanoes. Now, when these monsters, Typhon, Briareus, Enceladus, and their brothers fell, the earth trembled mightily, and Hades, god of the underworld, fearing his kingdom would be laid open to the light of day, mounted his chariot drawn by black horses, and made a circuit of inspection to see the extent of the damage. While Hades was thus engaged, Aphrodite, goddess of love, sitting on Mount Eryx, playing with her son, Eros, spied Hades. "My son," she said to Eros, "seize the opportunity to extend your empire. Take your darts and send one into the breast of yonder dark monarch. I wish him to love Persephone, the daughter of the goddess of the earth, Demeter. For Persephone, like Athena, the wise, and Artemis, the huntress, seems to defy our power. So if you have any regard for your own interests or mine, join Hades and Persephone in one." Then Eros unbound his quiver, and selecting his sharpest and truest arrow, shot its barbed point from his bow straight into the heart of Hades. At that same moment, in the vale of Enna, where spring reigned perpetually, Persephone played with her friends by a lake nestled in the woods. She gathered lilies and violets, filling her basket and her flower girdle with them. Hades, coming then upon her, gazed once at her, and instantly loved her. Commanding his horses to descend to the earth, he snatched Persephone from her playmates and bore her away with him. Persephone screamed to her mother and companions for help, but to no avail. And when in her fright she dropped the corners of her girdle and let the flowers fall from her, she felt in their loss her doom. But Hades, calling his steeds by name, urged them on, and reaching the river Cyane, struck the bank with his trident, forcing from the earth a passage to the infernal regions of Tartarus. Distraught Demeter, mother of Persephone, sought now her daughter the world over. Each morning bright-haired Eos, when she came forth, found Demeter busy in her search, and each evening Hesperus when he let out the stars. But at length, discouraged and sad, Demeter, disguised now as an old woman, subsided on a stone. 9 days and 9 nights, in the open air, under sunlight and moonlight, and falling rains, she sat there in Eleusis, until an old man named Celeus found her. Celeus had been out in the fields with his daughter, gathering acorns and blackberries, and sticks for his fire, while the little girl drove home their 2 goats. As the child passed Demeter, she stopped and said, "Mother," and the name was sweet to the ears of Demeter, "why do you sit here alone upon the rocks?" And Celeus also stopped, though his load was heavy. "I beg you," he said to the goddess disguised as an old woman, "do come with us into my cottage, such as it is, and stay with us." But Demeter declined. "Go in peace," she said, "and be happy in your daughter. I have lost mine." And as she spoke, something like tears, for gods never weep, fell down her cheeks and onto her bosom. Then the old man, weeping too, said again, "Come with us, and despise not our humble roof. So may your daughter be restored to you in safety." Now the goddess rose from the stone. "Lead on," she said, "for I cannot resist that appeal." While walking to the cottage, the old man told Demeter of his only son, Demophon, who lay ill and feverish, and Demeter stooped and plucked some poppies. Then they passed through Celeus's door, and Matanera, his wife, though in great distress for the little boy, seemed now beyond recovery, received the goddess kindly. The goddess in turn stooped and kissed the lips of the sick child. Instantly, The paleness left his face, and healthy vigor returned to his body. The whole family was overjoyed, and they spread the table for a feast, and put upon it curds and cream, apples and honey in the comb. As they ate, Demeter secretly mingled juice from the poppy she had gathered with Demophoon's milk. And that night, when all was still, she arose and took the sleeping boy in her arms and molded his limbs with her hands. She uttered over him 3 times a solemn charm, and then laid him in the ashes of the fire in the hearth. Matanera, who had been watching what her guest was doing with her son, sprang forward and snatched the child from the fire. "Mother," Demeter cried out, assuming her own form, divine splendor shining all about her, "you have been cruel in your fondness for your son. I would have made him immortal," she told the astonished parents, "but you have thwarted my attempt. Nevertheless, he shall be great and useful," she continued. "He shall teach men the use of the plow and the rewards which man can win from the soil." And so saying, she wrapped a cloud about her, mounted her chariot, and rode away. And still Demeter continued her search for her daughter, going from land to land across seas and rivers, returning at last to Sicily, from whence her quest began. There, by the banks of the river Cyane, where Hades took her daughter Persephone for his own, the river nymph wafted before Demeter the girdle which Persephone had dropped in her flight. Seeing this, the goddess, beside herself with grief, laid the blame for her loss on the innocent land, for indeed she knew not, in her despair, what else to do. "Ungrateful soil, which I have endowed with fertility and clothed with herbage and nourishing grain," she wept, "no longer shall you enjoy my favors." Then the cattle died, and the plow broke in the furrow, and the seed failed to come up. There was too much sun and too much rain. The birds stole the seeds, and only thistles and brambles grew. Seeing this, the fountain Arethusa interceded for the land. "Goddess," said she, "blame not the land, for it opened unwillingly to yield a passage to your daughter. I can tell you of her fate. Fleeing from Alpheus, god of this river, who wished to mingle his stream with mine, I saw her. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, whose votary I am, endeavoring to aid my escape from Alpheus, wrapped me suddenly in a cloud, cleft the ground, and I plunged into a cavern and through the bowels of the earth. While I passed through the lower regions, I saw your Persephone." She was sad, but no longer showing alarm in her countenance. I believe she had grown to love and respect Hades, for he was kind to her. Her look was such now as became a queen, the queen of Erebus, powerful bride of Hades, the monarch of the netherworld. Upon hearing this, Demeter stood for a moment like one stupefied. Then turning her chariot toward the heavens, she presented herself to Zeus, the supreme god. She told the story of her loss and implored Zeus to return her daughter to her. Zeus consented on one condition, that Persephone should not have taken any food during her stay in the lower world. Otherwise, the fates would forbid her release. Then, in accordance with this decision, Hermes, the winged messenger, was sent accompanied by Spring to demand that Hades give up his bride, Persephone. Hades consented. But Persephone had taken a pomegranate, which Hades had offered her, and had sucked the sweet pulp from some of the seeds. This was enough to prevent her complete release. However, a compromise was reached. Persephone would pass half the year with her mother, and the rest with Hades, her husband. Now Demeter, understanding she could not have her daughter to herself any longer, allowed herself to be content in this arrangement, and restored the earth to its fruitfulness. Now, too, she remembered her promise to Celeus and his family, to Demophoon, his son. And she took Demophoon in her chariot, drawn by winged dragons, through all the countries of the earth, imparting to mankind seeds and grains and the knowledge of agriculture. Then Demophoon built a magnificent temple to Demeter in Eleusis, and established the worship of the goddess under the name of the Eleusinian Mysteries, which in the splendor and solemnity of their observance surpassed all other religious celebrations among the Greeks. And thus the seasons came to be. When Persephone leaves for Tartarus and Hades, her husband, autumn, when the leaves fall, and winter, when nature dies. And then, when Persephone returns from the lower world, spring, when seeds nurture, and summer, when they flower.